Welcome and thank you for attending our Facilities Fundamentals Workshop. This is the first in a series of workshops utilizing the skills and experience of our staff to benefit the campus community while telling our story as a department. Today's workshop, Helpful Tips for the DIY Gardener, is facilitated by Jason Cottrell. Jason has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Ornamental Horticulture and Landscape Design from the University of Tennessee. Prior to working at UT, Jason worked as a horticulturalist at Blackberry Farm Resort for 7 years. In 2005, he joined the UT Facilities Services staff as a horticulturalist and is now an assistant director overseeing landscape services. The landscape unit is comprised of 40 full-time staff and 10 seasonal staff members. They maintain 600 acres of main campus and 200 acres on the Cherokee farm. He has over 20 years of experience in the commercial landscape maintenance industry. Ladies, please welcome Jason Cottrell.
So I'm assuming that most of you are going to be putting together a honey-do list, I guess. So now, in thinking about who might be here today, of course, I knew there was a large number of females that had RSVP. I thought there might be at least one male in the group, and I was going to pick on him. But anyway, so with that being said, I don't know, what your experiences are, how if you have any avid gardeners in here, what have you. But I guess my intent with this presentation is to hopefully touch on some things you don't know, and hopefully give you some tips that will help you at home and improve aesthetics, but also helps save some time too. Because some of the things that you'll note in here that I'll go over are time-saving tips, or use of herbicides and so on. So we'll move on into it. Once again, DIY gardener, tips for the DIY gardener. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about lawn preparation and also just basic care of the lawn. Talk about bed maintenance and pruning and some basic planting practices. We're not going to dive in too deep on the pruning and planting, but just the general basics. I could talk all day on proper planting and pruning. We'll start with the lawn. It seems like most of the questions I get from folks, whether it's just people at UT or co-workers or people at church or what have you, they're always asking about the lawn and what can they do to have a better looking lawn. So we'll dive into that first. So what affects turf quality? You've got weeds, and obviously the competition that weeds provide against the turf grass. They compete for nutrients and water, sunlight. Irrigation, so how much and when is the proper time to irrigate. Mowing techniques, light exposure, what's important to a turf grass as far as its need for sunlight, and then also soil. And soil is kind of a hidden element that we'll dive into a little bit. Use of herbicides with weeds. Okay, obviously in a lawn, you can go out there and pull weeds all day long. You're not going to win that battle. I'm a tree hugger. I like to go as green as possible. Don't like to use a whole lot of herbicides, but I will tell you, you have to use herbicides if you want to have a pristine lawn. So with weed control in the lawn and in the landscape, but we'll talk about the lawn first, you want to be as proactive as possible. And what that means is most people don't think about the weed until they see the weed. You need to be as proactive as possible by using pre-emergent. You have pre-emergent herbicides and post-emergent. The definition of those: pre-emergent is obviously pre-game. It's the pre-game show. It's before the weed emerges. And obviously post-emergent would be actually a liquid that you would mix a concentrate and spray after you see the weed. So we're going to focus primarily on pre-emergent. Let's talk about a weed seed. So let's say this right here is a weed seed. It's sitting here in the soil. It's waiting for optimum water, optimum sunlight, optimum soil temperature. Once the soil temperatures start rising in the spring, that seed, the first thing it's going to do is throw a taproot into the soil. Once that taproot has established, then at that point in time, it's going to start the above ground growth that everybody sees. What's important about that taproot is that if it hits a pre-emergent herbicide, it will kill that root. Therefore, that weed never has a chance. So, this is just an example. This is one product. It's called Dimension. It's probably one of the best products on the market for lawn pre-emergent application for weed control. It is a granular product. You're not going to be able to go out and buy this at Home Depot, Lowe's, garden centers. You're going to have to go to John Deere Landscapes or Keeling or some of the commercial suppliers. Homeowners can buy from these folks. You can only buy non-restricted chemicals from them. So this is a non-EPA restricted herbicide. You can walk in off the street and buy it, not a problem. The key time to put this down, and this just helps most people. Most people remember this more than anything. It's before the forsythias bloom. Forsythias have been shown to coincide with germination of weeds and a lot of our weed problems that we have. So, for all case and purposes, your pre-emergent needs to go down in February. Okay. By applying it in February, you have a few rains that hopefully take place. It will create a layer in the soil, and then you've got about an 80 to 90% protection then against weed population. You're still going to have some weeds, and that's when you go back in with your broadleaf herbicides and so forth. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you do that yearly?
You do that yearly. Yeah.
Okay.
And then if you're concerned about crabgrass and summer weedy grasses that pop in, then you want to go back in about 2 months later. You want to read the label. It'll give you some instruction. But typically, most products are about 2 months later. You go back in and do another application, and they'll give you control throughout the summer, or at least during the time frame in which the summer grasses are germinating. You don't want to wait too late in the summer to put these down, though, because then in the fall you're going to do a renovation or you're going to do overseeding. And I've already explained how it works.
Yeah.
It'll affect your overseeding. So, all right. So post-emergent, I'm not going to go dive into that too much, but there's plenty of products on the market for broadleaf weed control in the lawn. One thing I will tell you, one tip I will tell you, is most of these herbicides, post-emergent herbicides, do not have a surfactant. A surfactant is like an oil that allows it breaks the bond of any waxy coat or any pubescence that's on the leaf surface. You can certainly buy a surfactant. I never see surfactants on the shelf at Home Depot, Lowe's, garden centers. You can only find them at Co-op and other places. But you can also just use liquid dish soap. Just use Dawn or Joy or Palmolive or whatever. So a few tablespoons for a tank. All right, so we'll dive into irrigation. So how much is too much, what's too little, and what's just right. And then also we're going to talk about a little about when is the right time to water. So let's talk about when first. Textbook time to water a lawn is going to be as close to daylight as possible. I mean, you can water 5 o'clock in the morning before daylight, that's fine. You can even water after the sun comes up. Don't wait till too late in the day because you're just wasting water. It evaporates too quickly. By watering at night before you go to bed or in the middle of the night, what's happening is you're introducing moisture that's going to sit around in that lawn all night long, especially with our high humidity that we have in the summer months. That's going to invite all sorts of fungus and disease problems. So basically, as close to sunrise as possible. How much? So once again, textbook 1.5 to 1.5 inches of rainfall per week is what a tall fescue lawn requires. Basically, grass is waterlogged. Shrubs, trees don't require a whole lot of water once they're established, but turf is a continual water hog its entire lifespan. So, but you don't want to water that 1.5 inch of rainfall all at one time. You don't want to just put it all down in one day and say, okay, I'm good for the week. You need to break that up into frequent waterings so that you're getting that soil, that root zone satisfied, and then you wait a day or so, and so every other day is about right for the summer months. Obviously not as much in the spring and the fall, but summer you definitely need to keep water on the lawn if you've got a nice healthy lawn. About every other day in the heat of the summer, especially if we're in a drought. And then drainage. Drainage is important. If you have poor drainage, you obviously have water sitting in the lawn. You may have a heavy clay soil. You may have low areas. Obviously, you can fix the low areas by filling those in. That's not an issue, really. We'll talk about what's under the surface here in a few minutes, but if you have a dull mower blade, you're going to have, you lay down and look in the lawn, kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You're looking at grass blades that have been ripped off. The tips have been torn off. They haven't been cut. If you have a clean cut on a grass blade, then it kind of cauterizes itself and it seals up, and you stop water loss, and it heals pretty quickly. When you rip the blade of grass, not only is it aesthetically not very pretty, but you're creating more sites for water loss. That grass blade has a hard time of kind of sealing off those wounds, and also opens up more and more more surface area for disease and fungus to set in. Okay, so sharp mower blade is important. You usually want to sharpen your blade at least once a year. If you're one of those that hits rocks and sticks a lot, maybe more than once. So a lawn that is cut with a dull mower blade will kind of look like it's been chewed, and have that dull. Basically, you'll lose that green health, and you can have the healthiest lawn in the subdivision, and it's still going to look terrible if it's cut with a dull blade. You just can't. Cutting height. Cutting height is important on tall fescue. Ignore the 1, 2, and 3 inch. Tall fescue needs to be cut in that 3.5 to 4 inch range. Okay? Where people make the mistake is when they think, well, I can just lower my mower deck down and I won't have to mow for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, you may not have to mow the rest of the summer to do that, because you're probably just going to you're going to scalp your lawn and that's it. Especially if you do that in the middle of summer. But what this slide is supposed to represent is the 1/3 rule. You want to make sure that you're mowing your lawn often enough in the spring, that means maybe more than once a week, to remove no more than about 1/3 of the growth. Once you start moving into removing half of the growth or half of the height, then you stand a chance of potentially scalping the lawn and getting down into that sheath, that growing sheath that we mentioned earlier, and potentially damaging the lawn over the long term. It takes turf grass a whole lot longer to pull back from a scalp situation. When you've gone into that growth sheath with the blade, it has to pull from its reserves, reserved energy to restore that blade, or restore that system. So you want to make sure that you're cutting in the blade zone. And then grass clippings. We'll get into light here in just a minute, but obviously grass clippings, if you'll notice here, those grass clippings are so thick, they're not only blocking sunlight from hitting the lawn, but also probably in the heat of the summer, they're holding heat in, which will kill out the lawn as well. And also is perfect holding site for fungus and disease, and also it just doesn't look good. So ideally, if you're not removing your clippings through a bagger, you want to use a mulching blade. So you're chopping those clippings into multiple pieces. And that's actually good, because then you're kind of actually feeding the lawn as you go. You do have nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium that's inside that clipping, and then it breaks down and feeds the lawn as well. So light. All I have to say about light is turf, any kind of turf, enjoys life. I've noticed that tall fescue, though, will do probably better than anywhere on the north and east side of the home, especially a two-story home. It likes that exposure to the sky, and it gets enough foot candles of light throughout the day, but it likes to be kind of in that shady area of the residential home, because the shade from the home is producing a cooling effect throughout the whole day. So you're not losing soil moisture through the soil and excess moisture loss through the grass blades. Whereas grass on the south and western exposure tends to be a water hog. So thinking about kind of where you want to keep your lawn, or if you've got a new home, you're trying to figure out where to have your lawn areas and how to position your house. It's something no one will think about. If you like trees and grass, you're going to have a little bit of a problem. Although I mentioned fescue and even Bermuda grass, they like sun. Trees create shade, but also they suck up all the nutrients and all the water, and you have a competition between the tree roots and the grass roots. So. All right, so I mentioned soil conditions a little bit ago, kind of a hidden problem. Most homeowners have no idea what their pH levels are. They have no idea what's going on under the surface. So I wanted to touch on this a little bit. Let's talk about soil a little bit. So soil, that slide may be kind of hard to read, but this is basically your soil triangle. Every soil has clay, silt, and sand, hopefully. Soils that have more clay than anything else, you're going to have problems. If you have more silt, you're going to have problems. You can't grow grass in sand. Well, maybe Bermuda grass. But anyway, you really want to have a good mixture of all three. If you have drainage issues, you may have a little more sand in the mix. You may want to introduce more sand. If you're trying to grow a Bermuda lawn, you may introduce more sand, top dress with sand over a period of years. But just want to kind of make sure everybody understood kind of what the general soil makeup is. So you have, ideally you want kind of equal parts of clay, silt, and sand. Now, this is an image of a perfect soil profile. You've got your organic zone at the top, and as you move further down, you get into the clay, and then eventually into bedrock. But the reason I throw this slide in there is to kind of explain what happens in any kind of construction. Contractor comes in, they just ruin the whole soil profile. They dig down for the footers, they pull all the clay up to the top, and they leave the homeowner with a problem. So in a best case scenario, you work with a contractor to pull all the topsoil off, stockpile it, and then when construction's finished, you reintroduce that to the site. But if you haven't done that, then you have to deal with the problem. So all that I'm explaining here is that you may have to do some soil restoration in order to get a good healthy soil for any kind of plant growth, but we're kind of focusing here on turf right now. You do want some clay. Clay is important because it is a holding site for moisture. You do want some sand because that allows for air and water exchange and movement. And you do want some silt as well as what's a good holding site for your macro and micronutrients. So we talked about the soil test and fertility. Fertility and the ability of any plant to pull what's in the soil, nutrient-wise, up through the root system, you have to have a good pH. So this slide was thrown in there to kind of help you understand what's in the soil. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all the way down to iron and copper, zinc. And then I mentioned the clay soils and compaction. So we're going to move to compaction just real quick. A car that's parked, a teenager's car that doesn't have room on the driveway or in the garage, you park it in the grass for 4 years until they go off to college, or two years, I guess, they go to college. That's compacting the soil. Tailgaters on campus every other weekend in the fall, they're compacting the soil. It's going to happen. So depending on how much compaction you have going on at home, you want to get yourself on an aeration program. You don't necessarily have to aerate every year. I might recommend it for a new lawn or new construction home, just because we know what construction does to a construction site. So the most important thing is you want to rent an aerator that actually pulls the plug. It's called a core aerifier. It pulls plugs out of the soil and leaves an air pocket. You don't want to use something that just spikes the ground, because you spike it, that cavity is going to close back in. So obviously this is like a putting green or something, but that gives you an idea of what, you won't see this in tall fescue because it'll be hidden, but you have kind of an equal distribution of holes that have been produced in the soil. On a putting green, they remove the plugs. Obviously you can't put, they'll go back in and they'll backfill these, they'll top dress this with sand on a putting green, but at home you just aerate, pull the plugs, leave the plugs, those plugs will break up, and that loose soil will move back down into these holes. So here is a shallow root system. This is a compacted soil. So in a compacted soil, you have an unhealthy, shallow root system. The root system can't really penetrate through those heavy soils. After aerification, you now have oxygen and water exchange, which is what a healthy root system needs. As those plugs start to break down and filter back in, then new roots start to develop in those plug sites, and then within just a few months you should be improving, and over a period of a few years you should be improving the root system of your lawn. What that does is two or three things. Number one, deeper root system means you're probably having to water less, because those roots are reaching out in further places. They're reaching down in the depth of the soil profile where they can capture more water. That also means in the summer months you're going to have less die out over the course of summer and less work to have to do to restore in the fall. So, real quick, I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but when's the right time to renovate the lawn? Tall fescue, do not do anything now. Don't go out and waste money on seed and so forth and so on. But what's going to happen is you'll get good results. It'll look great until we start warming up in the summer. The root system hasn't had a chance to develop to withstand the summer heat and summer drought, unless you're just going to plan on forking out a lot of money for water bills. So best time to renovate for cool season turf, tall fescue specifically, will be in the fall. So what that means is you go in usually late July, August. If you just have a trashy lawn, you've got weeds, you need to, I would just recommend you start spraying Roundup and just spray everything out and start over. So you start that process early, because it's probably going to take a couple of spray cycles to get all of that killed out. Make sure you're doing a soil test to see what you've got going on in the ground, and then do a lawn renovation. We'll talk about something here in a minute you can rent to help out with that. Warm season turf, Bermuda grass, zoysia, stuff like that. You typically want to save those renovations for spring and summer, since that's the time of year when they love it. The drier the better for those turf grasses. So I have down here at the bottom a slit seeder. Okay, a slit seeder is looks like an aerator that you can rent, but it actually has a horizontal shaft with vertical blades about every 2 inches. And if you'll notice, it just slices a groove in the ground, and you can set the depth. Typically you want to just scarify the ground about 1/4 of an inch or maybe 1/8 of an inch. What that allows you to do is that gives you a little groove so that when you are overseeding your lawn or trying to do maybe a renovation of the lawn, you get good seed to soil contact. It's important that that seed has good contact with the soil. If you just throw the seed out, you're probably not going to get all of that seed down to the soil surface. So what happens is this creates like little cornrows where the seed drops in, and you can it's actually best to run this maybe in a checkerboard pattern so that you crisscrossed you had crisscross patterns. So by running this across a couple times and then overseeding as you water the lawn and as it rains, it'll wash that seed into those grooves, and and you can be very successful doing this. So if you'll notice in this particular one here, they may have had some crabgrass or maybe even some Bermuda that's come in through the summer into their fescue lawn. So they've just killed out a section of lawn with a herbicide, but they've gone ahead and run that Slit Seeder over the entire lawn, and then within a month or two, you shouldn't even tell they've even been there. It should look pristine and green with the right amount of water. So I know I'm skipping over this pretty quick, but that's the best way to renovate or restore an old lawn. So we'll move into bed maintenance. We'll talk about weeding real quick. I think most people fail with weeding because they just don't schedule to do it. You just have to be on kind of your weekly schedule. I know I kind of tackle weeds in the landscape bed at the same time I mow the grass. So it's just I do it all one time. I mow my yard, I check the landscape for weeds, and then I'm done. Or check the landscape for weeds. So it's just having that consistent schedule of hand weeding. You're going to go through quickly, just identify the larger weeds, pop those out, and have a herbicide sprayer ready to go with Roundup that you can just spot spray the small weeds, and within a day or two they're toast. So Pre-Emergent, which we'll get into here in a minute, is also about a 90% weed kill.
So that stuff won't kill any of your plants or flowers or anything in the bed?
Need to read the label.
Yeah.
However, I'll tell you what I do know about Pre-Emergent. We'll go into this in a minute, but the Pre-Emergent is any kind of daffodil or any kind of bulb flower, tulips. It won't kill that plant, but what it'll do is it'll prevent it from blooming. All the foliage will come up, but it will not bloom. This slide looks very similar to the other one, but it's a different product. This one's labeled for landscape use, not for turf. It's called Snapshot. You can buy this. It's not restricted. It is a little bit expensive, but it'll go a long way, and it has a good shelf life. So doesn't take a whole lot either. So it's a granular that you cast out in the landscape. Read the label as far as application timing, but typically about every 2 to 3 months. So you're looking at 4 to 6 times a year. What's going to happen is it'll create that layer in the soil again in the landscape, and as seeds germinate, you're really going to reduce your population by about 90% by doing this. And it has on the label plants that it's safe for. But I do know that we had some guys at the president's home several years ago before they sold the president's house. We had a huge bed of daffodils, and the guys put a Snapshot out, and this was before I knew that it would affect the bulbs. I didn't know this. And we had one bloom out of about 1,000 plants. The year before, we had plenty of blooms, so we scratched our heads, and it took about 3 or 4 people on the ag campus to help me out with that problem. And they finally said, well, do you use a Pre-Emergent? Yeah. And so I did it. So anyway, you can certainly use the Pre-Emergent in those beds where you planted tulips, but once you see the leaf emerge, then you need to stop. So post-emergent in the landscape, you really kind of dive into a real problem. There are no broadleaf herbicides on the market that you can spray over the top of your plant material. You're gonna injure your plant material or kill it. Now, if you have liriope, which everybody kind of knows as monkey grass, or you have other ground covers, there are herbicides out there that you can use to spray over top of those ground covers that will aid in control of nut sedge, if you're familiar with nut sedge, or just grass. If you have grass or Bermuda grass growing in the landscape, there are some specific herbicides to control that. All right, mulching. I'll just go ahead, I may be preaching to the choir here, but mulching aids in weed control, obviously, by smothering out the weed, helps with water retention, helps protect the root zone of the plant from extreme temperature changes, whether that's extreme cold or extreme heat. Obviously, everybody loves new mulch because it makes everything look great. But, you know, if you have a new if you're installing a whole new landscape and you're putting mulch down on just bare soil, you want to put a good, 3-inch application. But, a lot of people pile on the mulch every year after year, and that mulch does not break down that quickly. So you really just need to go back in on an annual basis and just do a dusting, no more than 1 inch. Because if you apply too much, you're just building way too much mulch onto that root zone. That mulch is actually going to absorb rainfall and rain, therefore stopping water from penetrating into the soil. So you want to keep it kind of on a thinner application year after year. So let's talk about pruning real quick. Pruning, obviously, you prune because you're trying to maintain size of plants, or you're trying to rejuvenate some new growth. Maybe it's an old plant that just looks tired, and you're wanting to cut it back pretty hard and let it kind of rejuvenate itself. Maybe you're trying to, maybe on some apple trees, fruiting trees, you're trying to specifically control how much flower production is produced on that tree so that you have better quality fruit. So, there's all sorts of reasons we prune. You also prune just to control maybe getting rid of dead portions of the plant, or maybe there's something unsafe in the tree, a limb needs to be removed, whatever. So we obviously have all sorts of reasons we prune. I will say this: if you're simply having to prune to keep plant material down below the windows or keep it from climbing up into your gutters or what have you, it might be easier just to rethink what plant you have. And there's all sorts of, just to give you an example, and we'll talk about this here in a minute. Crepe myrtles, you can buy crepe myrtle ground cover now, or you can buy Natchez, which is going to mature about a 40-foot height. So you can buy crepe myrtles that'll mature anywhere from ground cover up to 40 feet. 6 foot high, 9 foot, 12 foot, 15. So let's talk about pruning cuts. So I see this all over town. It's like a contagious disease. I don't know what the deal is here, but one landscape group sees somebody doing it, so they got to do it too. And then homeowners see it, and they think, oh, it looks good at Turkey Creek, I guess I must do it too. So unless you just like that look, don't do that. Okay? Buy a crepe myrtle, plant a crepe myrtle that's going to mature at the height you need it. If you've got power lines above you, buy something that's going to mature out at a proper height. So, crepe myrtles look wonderful if you just let them do their thing, and maybe keep them limbed up a little bit. Crepe myrtle is truly a shrub. It's just kind of over the years turned into this tree form. So pinching. Every plant has node and internode growth activity. So, I instruct all of our landscape crews when they're planting their annual flowers every 2 times a year to try to pinch out the central leader. What that does is that forces hormones and activity to go into the lateral bud growth so that our annual flowers spread out wider instead of growing so tall and leggy. So pinching out, you just pinch off your fingernail and it just pops right off. So, I'm sure people that in the bonsais, they do this kind of thing too. So that's just one form of pruning. Thinning, we mentioned trying to get more sunlight maybe to the lawn, what have you. You kind of see what they've done to this tree. They've gone in and maybe they removed some dead wood, I don't know. They've removed some cross branching that's rubbing. They've kind of cleaned this tree up. But now we have possibly a canopy that's not producing as much shade as it did. Maybe that's what the homeowner, or that's what the ultimate goal was. Heading back, I won't go too much into that. That's really just somebody going through and just using hedge trimmers and cutting it back. So
Really not supposed to do that, though.
not really good to do that. We do use hedge trimmers on campus just because of the bulk that we have to maintain, but we try to teach our staff, and I try to teach people that if you can do selective pruning, take your hand pruners. I mean, you know, you don't want a surgeon walking in with hitch trimmers or chainsaw. You want him to use his scalpel and be skilled. So use your hand pruners. You know, reach into the plant and remove that excess growth, or reduce the size of the plant by reaching into the plant and selectively pruning out all the way around. And when you step back and look at it, all your cuts are inside the plant, and you really can't tell anything's been done, except you've reduced the size of the plant. If we had more time, I could show you, but does that make sense? Probably pull up some videos on that. But, proper pruning cuts, in case you don't know, the one on the left is textbook. The second one from the left indicates, just too sharp of an angle. So what you've done is you obviously want to cut at a 45 to kind of just get any kind of keep water from setting on that cut. If you cut it flat straight across, you have a tendency for rot or deterioration right there. So this is the best cut. If it's too sharp of an angle, you actually have opened up a larger surface area by doing so. So it takes longer to heal that wound. You want to. This is kind of more toward roses. It goes for all plants, but for those who are asking questions about roses, this is what this is here. You have buds, dormant buds that are waiting to pop out. So by making this cut, you now have this bud right here, and probably several others that are going to put on new growth. So that's too close. You don't want to damage this bud collar. If you damage that bud collar, you're probably going to have weak or additional dieback in this zone here. So you don't want to cut too close. And of course, that's too much. You're going to have a lot of decay. Once you cut this off too high, that is no longer useful. This portion of the stalk is no longer useful for the plant. So it's just going to give up any activity, any nutrient going to that end of the plant or that end of the stalk, and it's just going to start to die, and you have disease that sets in and so forth. So if at all possible, you'll have the best success with healing from a pruning cut if you follow the example on the far left. This image is supposed to kind of simulate what was going on in a more formal hedge situation. The sunlight is being shaded by this wider upper canopy, so you lose foliage down here. The plant realizes that these leaves down here aren't doing anything for the plant, they're not capturing enough sunlight, so they say, well, I don't need you, I'm going to let you go. So a better way to combat that is to don't angle it out like a pyramid, but angle it just enough so that you're getting kind of equal distribution of sunlight on the sidewalls, if this is something that you...
So once you do that to the top, it'll start to, over years, will start to grow leaves again on the bottom?
Yeah, it'll take some time to recover, yeah. Because you're getting sunlight, you've removed the upper canopy of the plant, so now you've got hormones and growth hormones going to those dormant buds. You'll have dormant buds that are active down in this zone here, but the plant won't send any hormones, any nutrient to those buds while this is going on up here. So this is kind of along the lines of the thinning again. We're not just going in and we're not taking a mandina and just hacking it back with hedge trimmers every year, like my parents do, and I tell them not to do that, but do it anyway. If you're familiar with the bamboo nandina, has the red berries, they grow stalks. You can go down into the base of the plant and remove those tall stalks, and you'll have some shorter stalks that'll now be, the new hierarchy, so to speak, the tallest stalk in the plant. So every year you can remove those taller stalks, and this year's tallest stalks will be next year's tallest stalks. You just keep that cycle going. It's a little bit different example, but same concept. All right, and then planting. I'm not going to talk all about proper planting, but we'll wrap it up with this. Make sure that you're inspecting plants in the nursery or in the garden center before you buy them. Pull the pot off the plant. See if the root zone is kind of creamy or white color. Don't buy plants that have black, dark, dead-looking roots. You're probably going to find this about 100% of the time, but it would be better if you don't buy plants that have a root-bound situation. When you see this, it just means it's been left in the pot too long. You can fix this problem, so I'm not saying don't buy the plant. You can fix this problem. What you need to do is just loosen all those roots up. Take your fingers, take some kind of garden fork or something, and just loosen all this up and get those roots moving in a lateral direction. I've even seen people take like a garden knife or a garden saw, and they'll just cut the whole bottom of they'll cut 2 inches off the bottom of this root ball, and then maybe even kind of get the side walls kind of all hairy and going in the right direction. And we'll go into what that causes, what it causes a problem here in just now. I'll show you. So there's another example. So that right there is probably a little better idea of what kind of root system you should see in a container. You don't have this root-bound look. You have a little better look. But I will still point out there are roots that have hit the side wall of the pot, and now they're starting a circular growth pattern. And that root will keep that growth pattern from here on out, unless you fix that, unless you manipulate that problem. By not fixing that problem, you get this. Not only above the surface, but you'll get it under the surface too. So obviously this was a situation where somebody took a tree out of a pot and then just plunked it in the ground, and that was it. So it took some time for that tree trunk to mature and girth out, and of course the circling roots also expanded in their growth as well, their diameter. So eventually they met. And so what's going to happen is, you're essentially choking all nutrients out right here. There's nothing moving up into the canopy of the tree off this side of the tree, and you can see there's some girdling over here too. So that tree probably doesn't have too many more years. And at this point, you can't really fix this problem. Now, you can catch it early if you have a tree that's got girdling roots. You can prune it out. You can even some people take or hire an arborist to come in with an air knife or an air spade, and it's basically an air compressor, and just blast all the dirt away from the root zone, and they go in and physically do surgery on the roots, and then put all the soil back. Does that make sense? Correcting the problem. So if it's just a tree, you got to save up here. So I brought these slides are included to kind of show when you're planting a tree in from a container or a root ball, and you're going to have more. You're going to find this more often than in a ball and burlap and a root ball situation. You're going to find that if you plant the top of the root ball at the top of your soil profile, you have hidden this root flare. You really need to take the burlap and carefully peel it back and find this natural root flare. Every tree will have a natural flare. I've seen this more and more in the last few years. A lot of the root balls are all now mechanically spayed with hydraulic spades. And in the act of doing so, there's a lot of soil that's dumped on top of the root ball, and they just wrap it all up in a...
Is it bad to plant stuff around them like that and then put mulch around the side on top of that?
Yeah, you need to keep the mulch down as much as possible. So you need to keep that root flare exposed as much as you can. Over on the Cherokee Farm site, we did an inspection last week of a new landscape install by a professional landscape company. I'm not saying everybody, even the professionals do it wrong too. They just have to be educated. But every tree on the site over at the Cherokee Farm on the new building they just built, every tree is planted too deep. The top of the root ball is correct. They planted them so that the top of the root ball matches the soil around it. But there was probably about 3 inches of soil that was somehow got on top of that root flare. And so now the contractors have to go in, because we put that specifically in our plans, that the contractor has to locate the root flare and plant the tree according to those specifications. So, what happens is you just have a short-lived tree. And we don't want that. Yep, and I believe now that's enough. Well, thank you.
Thank you.